1920s, as we'll see, are a time of tremendous cultural flowering. It would be easy to teach the entire course on the 1920s simply because there's so much great literature, great art, great music to talk about. They're fundamentally new movements, and what we're going to be discussing today is one of the most influential poems in the English language. Certainly one of the greatest poems of the 20th century, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland. It's a long poem, and it's remarkable in a number of different respects. For one thing, it's a poem that has footnotes. Not many poems have footnotes. And some people think that disqualifies it as really great poetry. Not me. I love footnotes. So for me, it's like, oh, this one excellent thing and this other excellent thing. Put them together and you got an even more excellent thing. So anyway, I love it. Here you see Eliot explaining the structure of poetry on a blackboard. And so we're going to be talking today about this. It's a poem that has a tremendous number of references and expects a lot of the reader, even given the footnotes. There are 8 different languages that appear in the poem. And here we have 2 of them in the epigraph. So let's take a look at that. Nam sibilam quidem cumi sego se oculis meis, quidi inampula pendere cum ili puer diceret, sibila te thelis, respondebat illa, apothenem thelo. Okay, so how's your Latin and Greek? Okay, not as good. Yes, what does this mean? Well, nam, vidi, ego vidi, I saw, ipse oculis meis, with my own eyes, sibilam quidem cumis, actually ipse, the Sibyl Cume herself, okay, in Ampula Pendre, hanging in a jar, and cumili pueri diceret, and when the children said, Sibila tetheli, Sibyl, what do you want? She responded, I want to die. Okay, so that's a pretty weird epigraph. It comes from Petronius, the Satyricon, and, well, it's the story of the Sibyl of Cume. Now, who can tell me about the Sibyl? What was the Sibyl's deal? She was rewarded by the gods, and basically given any wish. And so her wish was to be immortal, never to die. However, she forgot to ask not to get any older. And so she gets older and older, more and more shriveled, but cannot die. And so, basically, what does she want? She actually wants to die. Because she doesn't any longer have any vitality left. She is just a shriveled specimen hanging in a jar. And that is going to be an image that will haunt this entire poem. That's the epigraph. And one of the things we'll have to ask is, who is the Sibyl? What is the Sibyl in this poem? What is it that is left lifeless hanging in a jar but cannot yet, at any rate, die? There's a dedication then to the poem to Ezra Pound, a fellow poet, Il mio fabbro. That's Italian, that's the better craftsman. And it's a reference to Dante's Purgatory. So there are lots and lots of allusions like that, lots of references to different poems in different languages, to different literature, to myth, to all sorts of things. You're expected to grasp all of these allusions and put them together to understand the meaning. Well, here's the beginning of the poem prompt. April is the cruelest month, breeding lilacs out of the dead land, mixing memory and desire, stirring dull roots with spring rain. Winter kept us warm, covering earth in forgetful snow, feeding a little life with dried tulips. Now that's a strange beginning for a poem that starts with spring. Let me just think, it's the wrong time of year for this, it was just the first day of fall a couple days ago, but still, think for a moment, spring. What does spring call to your mind? Okay, flowers, new life. What else?
Happiness.
Happiness. Yeah, excitement. It's sort of that. And here do we get that? No. April is the cruelest month. This is like an ode to spring written by Eliot, right? The cruelest month. Yeah, I mean, why is it so cruel? It's breeding things out of the dead land. The snow has been covering things. It was a blanket on the cemetery of everything dead or dormant. And now what happens? Well, gosh, April wakes it up. How do you feel when somebody wakes you up? You're there in a peaceful sleep, and somebody comes in and shakes you awake. Or, what happens usually to me, the cat bounces on you, goes up to your face and goes, in fact, I just saw a video, headline, I didn't actually watch it, but it said, woman who receives 96 cat calls walking through New York City. And I sort of thought, I received that many cat calls walking through my house, but all from real cats. Anyway, so yes, somehow this dead or dormant stuff is being awakened. That's difficult. That's a harsh thing. Now in the background here is the opening of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales. It too starts with spring. And notice here the nature of the images. One that April with this... I tend to bite my tongue when I try to speak Middle English. One that April with its sure suitor, the drops of March has pierced into the ruta, and bathed every vein in switch culture, of which virtue and gender is the fur. Okay, it's delightful. That's the way we used to talk. But, yes, this is usually translated when April with its showers sweet with fruit. The drought of March has pierced to the root and bathed each vein with liquor that has power to generate therein and sire the flower. So it's all about the spring rains, bringing flowers, bringing back life, and that's a good thing. But here we get that sort of in a minor key, played back very differently, so that it's a gloomy image. Now then there's a sudden shift. And this happens all the way through the poem. You're going along, you think you know what you're talking about, and all of a sudden the scene changes, the person who's speaking, the narrator changes. It's this sort of sudden jarring shift from one thing to another. So here we are with April cruelly waking up the ground, removing that covering, that warm, that sort of soft blanket of snow. And now all of a sudden summer surprised us, coming over the Starnberger See with a shower of rain. We stopped in the colonnade and went on in sunlight into the Hofgarten and drank coffee and talked for an hour. And that, by the pictures in the background are meant to be significant. That's actually a picture of the Starnberger See. But then, an overheard conversation. Bin gar keiner Russe. Stamm aus Litauen. Echt Deutsch. What does that mean? I'm not Russian. I'm a Lithuanian, a real German. Okay. Now, what on earth is going on? Why the sudden shift? We were in spring and it was cool and the snow was melting under the rains, and all of a sudden, boom! By the way, the first time I studied this poem, I was in college, and March in my college was disgusting. It was like 50 degrees and rainy for the entire month. And they allowed dogs on campus. What would happen is the dogs would run around in the mud, and get very dirty themselves and track that everywhere. But in addition, they would chase squirrels. They almost never caught squirrels. But basically, there was just like these squirrels and dogs slopping in the mud the entire month. It was repulsive and chilly. It made it easy to get in this, the mode of this poem. Like, yeah, spring sort of sucks. Look outside. That's Philadelphia in March. But now all of a sudden you turn around and you get something different. Summer surprises, and we're there on a lake in Switzerland. What's going on? I don't know either, okay? But let's keep track of this because the shifts keep happening. Here we get another one. And when we were children staying at the Archduke's, my cousins, he took me out on a sled and I was frightened. He said, Marie, hold on tight. And down we went. In the mountains, there you feel free. I read much of the night and go south of the wind. And now who's the narrator? Yeah, Marie, exactly. And tell me about Marie. What can you infer about Marie from just this? She's wealthy, right? I mean, her cousin is the Archduke. And they were staying in the mountains and they go sledding. She feels free there. She goes south in the winter. That's not something poor people do. And so you get this sense of aristocracy, of wealth, but it's in the past, notice, when we were children. She's older now. She's no longer a child sledding in the mountains, though she stays up much of the night and still is a cultured person. And yet there's something about, this grandeur in the past, this grandeur lost. Now we get another sudden shift. What are the roots that clutch? What branches grow out of this stony rubbish? Son of man, you cannot say or guess, for you know only a heap of broken images, where the sun beats and the dead tree gives no shelter, the cricket no relief, and the dry stone no sound of water. What's going on? Now we're suddenly in heaven. Son of man. What is that called on? Yeah, this is biblical imagery now. And we've got this picture of, well, the desert, the dead tree, the roots that clutch, stony rubbish around. You know only a heap of broken images. Now, here I think is part of how I interpret the poem and get sort of what's going on here. He is writing this just after World War I, looking at Europe, looking at the civilization that Europe embodied, and he's saying, what is left? A heap of broken images. Okay? This idea of fragmentation is something that's going to run throughout the poem. It looks like a highly disconnected, highly fragmented poem. We get this little part, and then this little part, and then, hey, now I'm Marie, as I'm recounting my childhood. And now all of a sudden I'm in the midst of this biblical wasteland, and now I'm here. Notice here is the first appearance of a wasteland, this stony rubbish, the dead tree, no shelter, no relief. And so that's the image of what's left. He finds himself in the midst of a wasteland. Sort of like this cannot die. There's this civilization around, but it's this shriveled hollow. It is not what it once was. He says, I look around and I know only a heap of broken images. In other words, he's saying, the civilization that's here, the culture, this unit, Europe, is now fractured. It's now divided up. It's broken. And it no longer has the vibrancy it once was. So he's looking at a civilization that he sees as somehow shattered, as somehow a wasteland. And there are these shards that indicate something about what this civilization was. But it no longer has life. Just as in Yeats, I was talking about the singing masters, where he's saying, you know, our culture used to be one where people went around and actually taught this civilization to other people as if it was still in its infancy. Now we look back on it as if it's in old age. And it's the same kind of contrast here. Instead of being vibrant and building up a civilization, he feels as if he's looking at the shattered remains of the civilization. Well, the dry stone, no sound of water. Only there is shadow under this red rock. Come in under the shadow of this red rock, and I will show you something different from either your shadow at morning striding behind you, or your shadow at evening rising to meet you. I will show you fear and a handful of dust. Now notice, your shadow at morning striding behind you. Is this morning of this civilization, where all the possibilities are ahead? Is it evening, where this is rising to meet you and you're marching to your doom? Actually, it's night. It says, I will show you fear in a handful of dust. A handful of dust, what does that mean?
Yeah, like when you die, you return to being dust again.
Good, death, dust to dust. And so, exactly, he's basically saying, look, I'm not saying this civilization is young and vibrant. I'm not even saying it's old. I'm saying it's dust. I'm saying it's dead. I'm saying that this is, or if not exactly dead, like the city, this dried, dusty hulk that is not really, in any very useful sense, alive. Now we get a shift in languages and another shift in imagery. Frisch weht der Wind der Heimat zu, mein Irish kid, voll weißt du. Now what's going on? In this section of the poem, there are a series of allusions to, and mostly quotations from Tristan and Isolde. The wind blows fresh to the homeland, my Irish girl. Where are you living? You gave me hyacinths first year ago. They called me the hyacinth girl. Yet when we came back late from the hyacinth garden, your arms full and your hair wet, I couldn't speak and my eyes failed. I was neither living nor dead, and I knew nothing, looking into the heart of light, silence. Oh, das man. Now, let's talk about the first part. They called me the hyacinth girl. Hyacinth, flowers, right? And so, yes, in springtime, I was the hyacinth girl. All this stuff blooming around me, it was wonderful. But we came back, and now I couldn't speak. My eyes failed. These are images that are going to keep coming back. Eyes failed, couldn't speak, so keep that in mind. I was neither living nor dead. So is it morning or evening? Neither. Am I living? Am I dead? Neither. He's describing something else, something like the Sibyl's condition. And now, I know nothing. Looking into the heart of light, the silence. Old und leer, das Meer. Desolate and empty the sea. Another Tristan and Isolde quotation. Something that Nietzsche, by the way, also refers to. Okay, so we're waiting. We're in a condition where we know nothing.
Neither do we admit we're expecting something that does not come. Empty and desolate is the sea. And now we get another ship. Unreal city under the brown fog of a winter dawn. The crowd flowed over London Bridge. So many I had not thought deaf and undone, so many. Sighs, short and infrequent, were exhaled, and each man fixed his eyes before his feet, flowed up the hill and down King William Street to where St. Mary Woolworth kept the hours, with a dead sound on the final stroke of 9. And there's a footnote there that says, I've often noticed that every time that clock strikes, just the last strike just sounds dead. But as if somebody is sort of damping it at the same time. Now, what's happening here? We're suddenly in London. No more lakes in Switzerland for us. Okay, brown fog of a winter dawn. And now we've got this crowd. Sighs, short and infrequent, each fixing his eyes before his feet.
Everyone's lost hope.
Yes, everyone's lost hope. And death had undone so many. Who is this traipsing around?
Coming back.
Ooh, people coming back from the war. Good. In fact, Bertrand Russell is the person who suggested this image to Eliot by saying, imagine that all of those killed in the war were here in London now. And Eliot, in his mind, thinks, yeah, all these people who died in the war, hundreds of thousands dead in these various battles, imagine that they're here. What would they be doing? So it's the dead. I mean, now I have to make it creepy and Halloweenish. but no, it's like that sort of image. It's meant to be creepy, really. And it, too, is a reference, in this case, to Dante's Inferno, where Dante is describing the scene in the Inferno where people are there and it's the dead, in this case, literally the dead, who are there walking in what he sees. Si lunga tratta di gente ch'io non avrei creduto che morte tanta sapessi di stare. So long a train of people, I should never believe death had undone so many. Okay, so here are all the dead. And you think about that. How many people have lived on Earth? How many have died before you even were born? Millions, right? Tens of millions, hundreds of millions, billions. And so here they are in the afterlife, walking around. And Dante literally looks at this and is just stunned. Well, then it continues. Here, to my hearing, there was no weeping, but sighs, which caused the eternal air to tremble. Tremor. Okay? Caused the eternal air to tremble. Now, these people, in other words, are they happy? Are these the happy dead, the grateful dead? No, they're not singing any songs. On the other hand, are they crying? Are they grief-stricken? No. They are, well, yeah, just silent. Okay? That's what it's like. And that's a sort of surprising image, too. Now we get yet another shift, another dramatic change. There I saw one I knew, but I stopped and cried, Stetson! Now, I've got to stop here. Stetson! What's the significance of that? What's a Stetson? A hat. Right, what kind of a hat? A cowboy hat, a really dressy, inexpensive cowboy hat. Now, what is that a symbol of? Oh, come on, where are we? Yeah, we're in Texas, right? I mean, come on, tell me what a cowboy signifies. You're in Texas, you're supposed to know this. In fact, you should be authentic, right? And understanding the symbolism here. Stetson, okay, cowboy, Texan, tell me, what does it mean to the rest of the world to be a Texan?
Independent.
Good, independent. What else? Bold? Strong, yeah. Strong, and in this case, alive, vibrant, okay? And here he's a Stetson, you who were with me in the ships at Milan. He's referring here in this sort of ancient context of this battle. Now, that corpse you planted last year in your garden, has it begun to sprout? Will it bloom this year, or has the sudden frost disturbed its bed? Oh, keep the dog far hence that's friend to man, or with his nails he'll dig it up. And now we get a shift to yet another language, French. You, hypocrite lecteur, mon semblable, mon frère. Okay? You, hypocrite reader. my likeness, my brother. What's happening here? We go from this symbol of life, vibrancy, strength, Stetson, to then this creepy thing about the corpse, and will it come back to life? Then the dog might dig it up, and then accusing the reader of hypocrisy, although also said, you, my likeness, my doppelganger, you're just like me, my brother. What's happening? Okay, it's a really puzzling poem. Another of these fragments, and here within the fragment it feels very fragmented. You, Stetson, hey, we were brothers in arms together, and then, wait a minute, you killed someone. Okay, there was a corpse you planted. We were in the wars together. You killed some people. What about that? And then he suddenly realized, yeah, shoot, things appear dead. Well, we've got to investigate some of the references here. There's a John Webster poem that Eliot cites in the footnotes. It goes like this: but keep the wolf far thence that's foe to men, for with his nails he'll dig them up again, referring to a cemetery. But here is part of the biblical background, which also Eliot refers to. He's referring to the ceremony in the Anglican Church of the burial of the dead. And there are two biblical passages that are referred to in that context. So the title of the section is The Burial of the Dead. Here we are talking about corpses being dug up again. We're with Dante in the afterworld, looking at those corpses sighing and walking around dully. And here are the biblical verses. I am the resurrection and the life, saith the Lord. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. Whosoever liveth and believeth in me shall never die. So it's about life and death and the possibility of life after death. And here's the other one. Set, by the way, in a beautiful musical setting by Handel, Messiah. I know that my Redeemer liveth, and that he shall stand in the latter day upon the earth. And though after my skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh shall I see God, whom I shall see for myself, and mine eyes shall behold and not another. So the idea of the burial of the dead here that he's referring to in the background is that ceremony. That ceremony for the dead, saying, but there is the possibility of eternal life. And yet in the poem, do we get the hope of eternal life? No. Or if we get it, it's this glimpse of the afterlife as well. Like the crowds on a winter morning in the fog, walking dully across the bridge. Okay? It is not something that is hopeful. By the way, Eliot later converts to Christianity and becomes a Catholic, but at the stage he's writing this poem, he's not. He is sort of wrestling with religious questions, but remains agnostic. And so here, in the background, given the title and so on, is that hope of life after death, and yet we don't find the hope in the poem itself. But the issue of that first part, really the burial of the dead, is about life and death. It's all about, you might say, hope for the future with this reflection on not just individual life, but in the life of a civilization. Now, part two is a game of chess. I'm not going to talk about it since we really only have one class to go into this here, and in the college course I took where we covered this, we spent about 3 weeks on it. But anyway, part two is really about misdirected and sterile sexuality. There are a number of figures who appear here: Cleopatra, the story of Tereus and Philomela, who was turned into a nightingale. We'll come back to that one. Or maybe I should talk about that now. There's a hectoring wife. There are the women in the pub discussing something, and it takes a while for you to realize they're discussing an abortion. And then finally, the story of Ophelia in Hamlet. Now I'll say a little bit about this. There's some great passages here, like the passage about the hectoring wife. Yeah, I've got to, please forgive these voices, but I've got to imagine myself as this couple sitting around a sort of disgusting place in London. I never know what you're thinking. Think! Oh, I think we're in Rat's Alley, where the dead men lost their parents. Do you know nothing? Do you see nothing? Do you remember nothing? I remember those are pearls that were his eyes. Okay, people you definitely don't want to hang out with. But now, what is going on here? Do you know nothing? Again, we get that theme of knowing nothing, right? Having nothing left but fragments, the dust. And you don't remember anything? Well, I remember one thing. Those are pearls that were his eyes. That's a reference to Shakespeare from The Tempest. Full fathom 5 thy father lies, of his bones are coral made, those are pearls that were his eyes. Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange. See him sourly ring his knell, further than ding dong. Hark, now I hear the ding dong bell. So the image is one of death, in this case death by drowning. And so the reference is, well, those are pearls that were his eyes. In other words, thinking about death. Here's what I know. We're all doomed to die. Well, we'll come back to some of the other parts of that. But now I want to look at part 3, the fire sermon. Here we get something that gives us some indication of where this is all going. Because after all, Eliot so far could have just said, you know what? We're all going to die. You're going to die. I'm going to die. We're all going to die. Okay? And you might think, yeah, okay, I get the point here. There's more to it than that, of course, but that's so far the overarching theme. But now we get something that's a little bit different. First of all, the reference, the fire sermon. What is the fire sermon? What is he referring to? Exactly, it's a sermon of the Buddha. And it's actually quite a long sermon from the Buddha, and it's a very repetitive one, as you'll see. It's all about desire. It's all about the first of the, well, I guess the first 2 of the 4 noble truths, that life is suffering and that the cause of suffering is desire. So, here's how the poem section starts. The river's tent is broken. The last fingers of leaf clutch and sink into the wet bank. The wind crosses the brown land unheard. The nymphs are departed. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. The river bears no empty bottles, sandwich papers, silk handkerchiefs, cardboard boxes, cigarette ends, or other testimony of summer nights. The nymphs are departed. So now what's the image?
Nasty river.
Nasty river. Yeah, there's been some kind of party on the river, right? But the party's over. And not only is the party over, but actually everybody's left now. And we don't even see the trash from this river. The river doesn't have the empty bottles, sandwich papers. The implication is it did happen. People threw trash in the river and so on, but that's gone. In other words, we don't even actually see much evidence any longer of this party that was there on the bank. It seems to be disappeared. And it continues. And their friends, the loitering heirs of city directors, departed, have left no addresses. The heirs of city directors. What does that suggest? Who are these people partying on the bank? Yeah.
They're rich.
Well, are they rich? Who are city directors and who are their heirs? Do any of you have parents who work for the city of, I don't know, Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, Fort Worth, whatever? Are you rich?
No.
Yeah, no, this is sort of, I mean, these people are well off. They're well off to be partying on the riverbank, but it's not, at least if these people are honest, they're not rich, right? And so these are sort of the loitering heirs of city employees. Okay, they've left no addresses. And so it's somewhat different. Earlier in the poem, we had an image of wealth, really, of the upper crust of society. Now we're going down a notch and having this image of people who are well off, but not really wealthy. And in between, I've left out the story in the pub and so on, but that's a very lower class sort of image. And so we've got this mixture of upper class and lower class, now of sort of middle class or upper middle class maybe. And you're right to point to the fact that there's a sort of class thing going on here. He's portraying various classes, but in a certain sense, they're all facing the same problem. And so here, yeah, they were partying, but that's over. Okay, by the waters of Leman, I sat down and wept. Leman is a lake in Switzerland, so actually here's a reference to that earlier scene by the Starburger scene. But what's the biblical image here? By the waters of Leman, I sat down and wept. By the waters of what? I sat down. Gosh, didn't you people ever go to Sunday school? What's the matter? Well, Psalm 137. By the rivers of Babylon, there we sat down and wept when we remembered Zion. This is people talking about the Babylonian captivity. So what's going on here is really, yeah, I sat down and wept remembering the civilization that once was. The civilization that's been destroyed. I remember what it was like. And it was like that, in other words, not only for the wealthy aristocracy, but it's that way also for the heirs of city directors. It's that way for middle class people. They are sitting there remembering what was lost. The war has devastated Europe. The civilization is falling apart. And it's fallen apart. What's left are heaps of broken images, fragments. And so he's looking at this and saying, yes, we sit down and we weep. In this case, by the waters of Land. He's there again by a Swiss lake writing this, but he's basically having everybody sitting down and recognizing this huge sense of loss, that they've lost something important. They're never going to go back to the way things were. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. Sweet Thames, run softly, for I speak not loud or long, but at my back. In a cold blast I hear the rattle of the bones, and chuckle spread from ear to ear. Well, the rattle of the bones, chuckle spread from ear to ear. What's behind him? Death. There are a number of different images here that are referred to, one from Edmund Spenser. Each one did make his bride against her bridal day, which is not long. Sweet Thames, run softly till I end my song. So here is Spenser looking at a bridal day, a wedding, but in this case, a wedding is a promise of the future. Not this wedding long since past, even the trash is now gone, and there's no sign but left. And there's also a reference here to a great, great poem, Andrew Marvell, to his coy mistress. But at my back I always hear time's winged chariot hurrying near, and yonder all before us lie deserts of vast eternity. So, that, by the way, is basically a seduction poem. He's basically saying, look, sweetie, we're not going to let you go. But in any event, in this case, what is at my back hurrying me? Here, time. What is it in Eliot? Death. Okay, it's basically the same image, but in Eliot, much more direct. The clattering bones are right behind it. And so, I've got this sense that, well, time is running out. Now, we get still another shift in images. A rat crept softly through the vegetation, dragging its slimy belly on the bank, while I was fishing in the dull canal on a winter evening round behind the gas house, musing upon the king my brother's wreck, and on the king my father's death before him. So here he is fishing, with the rat climbing along on a dull winter evening. Again, lifelessness. And the reference in this part of the poem is to a story called The Fisher King. This is a sort of myth. There were a number of works, The Golden Bough, and also Weston's book, what is it called? I think I have it on a later slide. But in any event, here's the story, and it's a unifying story in a lot of different world religions. Something like this, the story of the Fisher King. The king is charged with keeping the Holy Grail, or some other important holy relic. He's wounded, and the kingdom turns into a wasteland while the king is struggling for his life. Well, the whole idea, in a way, is that a religion forms around this sort of myth. It's viewed as a fertility cult that centers around the sacrifice of a sacred king, who is then revived and enables the earth to be reborn in the spirit. So the thought is, why is the earth experiencing winter? Why does everything look dead, dormant, and lifeless? The answer is, well, the Fisher King has been wounded. And so the king is wounded, everything is drying up, everything is dying out, the kingdom is turning into a wasteland, and now somebody, somehow, has to get things back to life. And an act of sacrifice is required. Well, that is, in a sense, what this part of the poem is about. That image. At this stage, Eliot is still viewing this, as Weston and Fraser and other people did, as actually an argument against Christianity. If you find a story similar to this, of a king making a great sacrifice, and in this way it leads to rebirth, the thought is, look, there's something deep in the human psyche that just produces a story of this kind. And so a lot of anthropologists took this as an argument against the truth of religion. What's interesting is that just a few years after writing the poem, Eliot turns around and says, actually, this strikes me as an argument in favor of religion, in the sense that if there's something like this that's inherent in the human psyche, why is it there? Why would there be such a story if that's there? Maybe because it's true. But in any event, however you want to take that, that's the underlying myth of this part. Now we get yet another shift. At the violet hour, when the eyes and back turn upward from the desk, when the human engine waits like a taxi, throbbing, waiting. So now, somebody leaving work. I, Tiresias, though blind, throbbing between two lives, old man with wrinkled female breasts, can see at the violet hour the evening hour that strives homeward, and brings the sailor home from the sea. Who is Tiresias? Okay, yes. There is a bet between Zeus and Hera about sex, actually. About whether sex is better for the man or for the woman. Okay? And here's the problem. People, well, now I guess that there is a transgender category. This question is more complicated. But in ancient Greece, it looked like, well, you know only one side of the question. And so nobody's really well situated to answer this. So they come up with an idea. They take Tiresias, who ends up blind, but they give him both male and female sex organs and allow him to experience life as, well, sex in particular, as both man and woman, to settle the bet. Anyway, he comes back and says, oh, it's better for women, and then the loser of the bet gets very angry with him and so on. Now, I won't go through the full idea, but that's it. So this is also like part 2 about sexuality. So, at the violet hour, the evening hour that strives homeward, it brings the sailor home from the sea. And now he has a footnote. This is interesting because he sees this as the heart of the poem. And I've got to admit that when I first read it, I didn't see this as even near the center of the poem. But anyway, here's what he says. Tiresias, although a mere spectator and not indeed a character, is yet the most important personage in the poem, uniting all the rest. Just as the one-eyed merchant, seller of currants, melts into the Phoenician sailor, and the latter is not wholly distinct from Ferdinand, Prince of Naples, so all the women are one woman, and the two sexes meet in Tiresias. What Tiresias sees, in fact, is the substance of the poem. So what Tiresias sees is now going to be the heart of all of this. But what does Tiresias see? Well, it would be nice if we got a clear account, but instead we get another shift. To Carthage then I came, burning, 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 burning. O Lord, thou pluckest me out. O Lord, thou pluckest. Burning. Let's start understanding that by thinking about what the fire sermon actually was. Here is an excerpt from the Buddha's fire sermon. All things, O priests, are on fire. And what, O priests, are all these things which are on fire? The eye, O priest, is on fire. Forms are on fire. Eye consciousness is on fire. Impressions received by the eye are on fire. Whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or indifferent, originates in dependence on impressions received by the eye. That also is on fire. Everything is on fire, according to the fire sermon. It goes on and on. With what are these on fire? With the fire of passion, say I. With the fire of hatred, with the fire of infatuation, with birth, old age, death, sorrow, lamentation, misery, grief, and despair are they on fire. Now, there are classic evils in Buddhism. Old age, death, sorrow. These are classic evils in the basic Buddhist speech. And our lives are on fire with all of this. Well, it goes on and on, as I said. But here's the key point. Whatever sensation, pleasant, unpleasant, or indifferent, originates in dependence on impressions received from the mind, for this it also conceives an aversion. And in conceiving this aversion, he becomes divested of passion. And by the absence of passion, he becomes free. And when he is free, he becomes aware that he is free. He knows that rebirth is exhausted, that he has lived the holy life, that he has done what it behooved him to do, and that he is no more for this world. Here we get an encapsulation of the Four Noble Truths, that life is suffering. Actually, the word in Pali is dukkha. Life is out of joint. It's the term used for a dislocated shoulder, for example. Dukkha, it's out of joint, it's suffering. There's something about life itself that is broken. In other words, it's not just the war, it's not just that a lot of people die, it's not just that civilization is at a certain stage. There's something about life that's broken, that's fragmented, that's shattered. And what's the cause of that shattering? Well, the Buddha's sermon says it's desire, it is passion. And the only way to overcome it is to become free of passion. So, in part, Eliot is saying, we've got to go back. We've got to go back to some of these fundamental truths. And here, look at that. It's passion, it is desire that causes trouble. And only when we are able to put aside desire can we overcome this. The reference, by the way, I thought I had it on here. I guess I didn't. In here, to Carthage then I came, that is actually Augustine in the Confessions, talking about going back from Rome to Africa, which was his home. And then, thou pluckest me out, thou pluckest. There's a biblical reference to that too. If the eye offends thee, pluck it out. Okay, from Matthew, the idea is, look, if this is leading you into trouble, get rid of it. If this is the cause of desire. So he's seeing something in Augustine's Confessions, in the Gospel of Matthew, in the fire sermon of the Buddha, all of which suggest that the cause of suffering is desire. And the solution is to get rid of desire. Now, section 4, death by water. Phlebas the Phoenician, a fortnight dead, forgot the cry of gulls, and the deep sea swelled the prophet-in-laws. A current undersea picked his bones and whiskers, as he rose and fell. So now again we have this image of death by drowning, of the body under the water having drowned. He passes the stages of his age and youth, entering the whirlpool, Gentile or Jew, oh you who turn the wheel in the windward, consider Phlebas, who was once handsome and tall as you. Here you see this image of the body in the water, being lifted by the waves, falling, no longer having any awareness of anything. Who is Phlebas? Well, it appears that this is a reference to a Platonic dialogue, the Philemus. Where, what is Philemus in the dialogue? Well, he's the guy who says it's all about pleasure. Life is about enjoyment. And so what are we really after in life? Pleasure, to avoid pain. Enjoyment, pleasure, and delight, and the class of feelings akin to them are good to every living being. And it's Socrates saying, no, I say it's not those, but wisdom and intelligence and memory in their kindred. It's more reason rather than pleasure. But Phlebas is the one who's saying life is about pleasure. And the image here is no. It's precisely that pursuit of pleasure that is what leads you into trouble, what leads you to desire and into suffering. Now, at the end of the poem, we go back to the basic theme of death. He who is living is now dead. We who are living are now dying. This section is called What the Thunder Said. Who are those hooded swarms? Hordes are swarming over endless plains, stumbling in cracked earth, ringed by the flash horizon only. What is the city of the mountains? Cracks and reforms and bursts in the violent air. Falling towers, Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. Unreal. We go back to that image of the unreal city. Now I want you to think, hooded hordes, what does that remind you of? The dead on the bridge, right? It's like that. And now we get the city over the mountains, but falling towers. We look for the city and we just see falling towers. And then look at the list. Jerusalem, Athens, Alexandria, Vienna, London. What is that a list of?
Cities.
Right, cities, and what kinds of cities? Well, okay, I'm hearing many things, and they're all right. Yes, but capital cities of empires, capital cities of great civilizations. And where are those civilizations now? Well, gone. And London. Eliot is right now writing this, I guess, in Switzerland, but he's normally living in London, and he's looking and saying, all these past civilizations, now London. He's seeing that, as like the capital city of a great, but now disappeared civilization. In this decayed hole among the mountains, in the faint moonlight, the grass is singing over the tumbled graves above the chapel. There is the empty chapel. Only the wind's home. It has no windows and the door swings. Dry bones can harm no one. So now we're in the chapel with this little cemetery. It's just bones. Everyone here is dead. Only a cock stood on the roof tree. Cocorico, in a flash of lightning. But then, a damp gust bringing rain. This is the first image of hope in the poem. It goes back to the very beginning. Why was April the cruelest month? Well, because the rain starts disturbing the dull roots. And here we see that finally we're in this dry land, this desert, this wasteland. But now, a hint of rain. I sat upon the shore fishing with the arid plain behind. Shall I at least set my ends in order? London Bridge is falling down, falling down, falling down. So, he sees here a civilization falling down around him, this image of London collapsing. But also he sits on the shore fishing, like the Fisher King. And he's thinking, shall I at least set my lands in order? In other words, what do I do if I'm part of this civilization that seems to be collapsing? What's my role? What do I do? Well, shall I at least set my own house in order? Maybe that's what I should do. I should just pay attention to myself. I should just enjoy the decline. That's one attitude. But now we get a series of references to other things in other languages. Now I pray by that virtue that guides you to the top of the stair, be mindful in the time of my suffering. Then he hid himself in the fire that refines. That's the part that's actually quoted there in the Italian. So this is Dante's Purgatory, where he's referring to a Provençal poet. Then he hid himself in the fire that refines. So now we see the fire of the fire sermon in a different role. Maybe it's not the fire of pain and suffering. Maybe it's the fire that refines. Quando fiam keucella? When shall I be as the swallow? Well, Yeah. Here, there is, and really throughout the poem, there is this story of Philomela and Tereus behind the scenes. This is a myth, most fully elaborated of its metamorphoses. And it goes something like this. Philomela and her sister Procne are there. Procne marries very well, it seems. She marries the king of Thrace, whose name is Tereus. Tereus is infatuated, however, with Philomela, his wife's sister. And at one point, he manages to get her alone and he rapes her. But then to prevent her from telling anyone what has happened, cuts out her tongue. She, to get revenge, can't speak to anyone, can't tell her sister what has happened, but constructs a tapestry that reveals the story and sends it to Procne. So Procne figures out from the tapestry what has happened. And she and Philomela plot revenge on Tereus. What do? They cook the son of Tereus that he had with Procne into a stew. And they feed it to the king, who eats the delicious stew, and they save out the head. And then at the end, as dessert, they bring out the head of his son. At which point the king is, well, let me put it this way, it all goes downhill from there. And Procne and Philomela are turned into birds. Philomela into a nightingale, and Procne into a swan. And so they are basically saved from the death they're about to face by this act of kindness from the gods. So anyway, when shall I be as the swallow? When shall I be saved from this death? The maid of Tereus sings under the poplar shade, so you would think musical trills of love came from her mouth and not a sister's complaint of a barbarous husband. She sings, we are silent. When will my spring come? When shall I be as the swallow, that I may cease to be silent? And so now, another, well, there are a variety of references to this. Now we get the Prince of Aquitaine, à la tour abolie, to the ruined tower. And here is the ending of the poem. These fragments have I shored against my ruins, while then I'll fit you, Hieronymo's mad again. Data, the yadvam yata, shanti, shanti, shanti. And it ends. These fragments have I shored against my ruins. What does Eliot see himself doing with all of these references? Why all the references to language? Why all the shifts in perspective? Why all these allusions to other works? What is he doing? He's gathering up the fragments, exactly. So he's there on the scene of this civilization. It's a dry wasteland, but he sees the shards of pottery that are left behind. What does he do? He gathers them. He's gathering up the fragments of the civilization, the heaps of broken images. And there's also a more hopeful point here at the end. Data yadvam yata. That is Sanskrit. And it's a reference to the Brahmanyaka of Upanishad. But here's the idea. Basically, the father has completed this training of three different groups, and they say, what words you have for us? And he says at the end, da. And the first group says, I understand. You told us damyata, be subdued. He says, yes, you have understood. Self-control. The second group says, tell us something. He says, da. And he says, do you understand? He says, yes, you told us data, give. He says, yes, you've understood. The third group says, tell us something. He says again, da. Well, do you understand? He says, yes, you told us the yadvam, be merciful. He says, yes, you've understood. So that is in the end what the thunder says, da, da, da. But what does it mean? It means be subdued, give, be merciful. And so let that triad be taught, subduing, giving, and mercy. Self-control, giving to others, and being merciful, forgiving. That is something that he says is in the Apologies. This is the foundation, you might say, of Western civilization. One of the oldest texts we have in Western civilization. And so in a way he's saying, gather up the fragments and go back to basics. Recover the core and try to rebuild from there. Next time we'll talk about